The world went from a blur of headlights and screeching tires to absolute nothing. 1 minute I was fighting the wheel, trying to avoid whatever was in the road. The next, a violent jolt, a sickening crunch of metal, and then black. It wasn't a gentle fade. It was a brutal, abrupt end to everything I knew. I woke up, or rather, my consciousness flickered back into existence, in a place that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Jude's Hospital. The name itself felt cold, sterile. Tubes snaked into me. Machines beeped a steady, unnerving rhythm. My body felt heavy, disconnected, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The doctors, with their grave faces and hushed tones, kept talking about my condition, about the severity of the accident. They called it a coma. But I wasn't asleep. Not really. I was just ill. Trapped. My mind, however, was wide awake, a prisoner in my own body. I could hear them, the nurses and doctors, their voices a distant hum. I could feel the gentle pressure of a hand on my arm, the cool wipe of a cloth. Yet I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink to let them know I was still in there, a silent observer in the theater of my own misfortune. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. I had plans, dreams. And now I was here in this quiet room, a ghost in my own skin, with the world outside continuing on without me. The silence was deafening, broken only by the mechanical symphony of the hospital. I tried to push, to fight, to scream, but nothing happened. It was like being buried alive, with only my thoughts for company. And the growing dread that something was terribly, terribly wrong, far beyond just a car crash. The sterile white of Jude's Hospital was a constant, a blank canvas for my trapped mind. Days bled into nights, marked only by the dimming and brightening of the fluorescent lights and the hushed footsteps of nurses. My body lay still, a statue in a hospital bed, but my brain was a frantic hummingbird, buzzing with every sound, every sigh, every whisper that drifted into my room. I was a ghost, an invisible witness to my own life, or what was left of it. Started subtly like static on a radio. Faint murmurs from the hallway, muffled voices through the door. At first, I dismissed them as background noise, the usual hospital hum. But then the words began to sharpen, to take shape. They were coming from my family, my own flesh and blood. The first time I truly them, it was my mother, Eleanor. Her voice, usually so sweet and concerned, was laced with a nervous edge. She was talking to my father, Robert, just outside my room. Their voices were low, conspiratorial, like they were sharing a dirty secret. "Are you sure she didn't see anything?" Eleanor's voice was a tight whisper, barely audible over the steady beep of my heart monitor. Before the crash, I mean. She was always so sharp, Robert. Too sharp sometimes. Robert's reply was a low rumble, dismissive. "Relax, Ellie. It was dark, raining. She wouldn't have seen a thing. And even if she did, she won't remember. Hayes is handling her medication. She's completely out of it." My blood ran cold. Hayes. Hayes. The man who'd been our family doctor for years. The one who'd put me in this state. Medication. I wasn't in a coma because of the accident. I was being kept this way. The realization hit me like another physical blow, stealing the breath I couldn't even gasp. They were talking about me like I was a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied up. A few days later, it was Thomas, my older brother. He sounded agitated, pacing just beyond my door. I could almost picture him, running a hand through his hair, that nervous tick he had when he was cornered. "Dad, I don't know if I can do this," he stammered, his voice cracking. It was a lot. More than we planned. What if someone saw me? What if she recognized the car? Robert's voice was sharp, cutting through Thomas's panic. "Nobody saw anything. You were careful. Just like I told you. And Evelyn, she's not going anywhere. She's just a vegetable right now. Don't you worry about her. Just stick to the plan. For the family. For future. My future." What future? They were talking about my accident like it was a planned event, a chore they had to get done. And Thomas, my brother, was involved. The thought was sickening. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to let them know I was here, listening, understanding everything. But I was trapped, a prisoner in my own silent shell. The visits continued, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. Eleanor would come in, her hand cool on my forehead, her words dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, my poor Evelyn. Just sleep, darling. Get better. We miss you so much." But her eyes, when she thought I couldn't see them, held a flicker of something else. Calculation. Relief. One afternoon, I heard Robert and Eleanor talking in hushed tones in the hallway, their voices laced with a chilling pragmatism. "The insurance will cover everything, of course," Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But the real prize, that's what we need to focus on now. Evelyn's shares in the company. With her out of the picture, it all becomes so much simpler." Robert chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Exactly, my dear. Sometimes a little inconvenience is necessary for the greater good. The Reed name will endure. And Evelyn, she'll be taken care of. In her own way. Inconvenience. Evelyn's shares." The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a horrifying mosaic of greed and deceit. This wasn't just about a car crash. This was about them wanting me gone permanently so they could have it all. The realization fueled a cold fury inside me, a silent roar against the suffocating stillness. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could hear. And I would remember. Every word. Every whispered confession. Every single lie. They thought they had silenced me. They had no idea they had just unleashed something far more dangerous. The sterile white of the Jude's hospital was a constant, a blank canvas for my trapped mind. Days bled into nights, marked only by the dimming and brightening of the fluorescent lights and the hushed footsteps of nurses. My body lay still, a statue in a hospital bed, but my brain was a frantic hummingbird, buzzing with every sound, every sigh, every whisper that drifted into my room. I was a ghost, an invisible witness to my own life, or what was left of it. Started subtly like static on a radio. Faint murmurs from the hallway, muffled voices through the door. At first, I dismissed them as background noise, the usual hospital hum. But then the words began to sharpen, to take shape. They were coming from my family, my own flesh and blood. The first time I truly heard them, it was Robert, my father. He was on the phone, pacing the hallway just outside my room. His voice, usually so booming and confident, was strained, tight with an anxiety I'd never heard before. He was talking about business, about Reed Enterprises, the company that was supposed to be our legacy. "Look, I told you it's handled," Robert said. His voice a low growl, trying to sound reassuring but failing miserably. "The shipment went through. No questions asked. The buyer was discreet, very discreet." He paused, listening, then his voice dropped even lower. "Yeah, the money's in the offshore account. Just like we agreed. That's the tricky part." My breath hitched, a silent gasp trapped in my chest. "Problem? What problem?" I knew Reed Enterprises wasn't exactly squeaky clean. Dad had always been a shark, willing to bend rules, but this sounded different. This sounded criminal. "The chemicals. They're gone," he continued. His voice barely a whisper now. "Disposed of. No trace. The at the warehouse. That was just a freak accident. Faulty wire, a spark. Nothing more. Nobody can connect that to us. Especially not now, with Evelyn. Indisposed." He was talking about me. My indisposition. My accident. He was using it as an alibi, a convenient distraction. The cold realization washed over me, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't just about money. It was about covering up something far more sinister. He was talking about chemicals, a warehouse, an incident. It sounded like a cover-up for something illegal, something dangerous. He was rambling on, his voice a frantic murmur. "We need to make sure the paperwork is clean. Everything looks above board. The auditors are coming next month. I can't have any loose ends. Especially not with that detective sniffing around. Miller, isn't it?" He's too sharp for his own good. Detective Miller. I remembered seeing him once at a charity gala, a stern-faced man who looked like he missed nothing. He was already investigating. They were worried. But they should be. Robert sighed, a heavy, ragged sound. Don't worry about Evelyn. Hayes is managing her condition. She's not going anywhere. She's just a body right now. No mind, no memory. It's for the best. For the family. For the business. He hung up, and I heard his heavy footsteps recede down the hall. For the best. For the family. My family was tearing itself apart, and I was the unwilling audience to their rotten play. The visceral horror of it all settled deep in my gut. This wasn't just about greed. It was about survival, about them protecting their empire, no matter the cost. And I, Evelyn, was just an inconvenient casualty they were trying to bury along with their dirty secrets. The silence of my room felt heavier than ever, thick with the weight of my father's confession. But it also fueled a fire within me, a cold, hard resolve. They thought I was just a body. They were wrong. So wrong. The sterile white of Jude's hospital was a constant, a blank canvas for my trapped mind. Days bled into nights, marked only by the dimming and brightening of the fluorescent lights and the hushed footsteps of nurses. My body lay still, a statue in a hospital bed, but my brain was a frantic hummingbird, buzzing with every sound, every sigh, every whisper that drifted into my room. I was a ghost, an invisible witness to my own life, or what was left of it. My father's confession still echoed in the quiet, a chilling soundtrack to my supposed unconsciousness. Now, a new presence filled the room. The scent of expensive perfume, Eleanor's signature blend, wafted in before she even entered. She glided in, a vision in soft pastels, her face a mask of tender concern. Her hand, cool and dry, rested on my forehead. "Oh, my darling Evelyn," she murmured, her voice a practiced lullaby. "Still sleeping. Just rest, sweetheart. Get stronger. We miss you terribly." Her words were sweet, but I'd learned to listen to the spaces between them, the subtle shifts in her tone that betrayed the carefully constructed facade. I remembered her, always so worried about appearances, about what the neighbors thought, about the Reed name. She was the architect of our family's public image, the one who smoothed over every rough edge, every scandal, every lie. "Your father is so worried," she continued, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "He's been working day and night to keep things together, especially after your accident." Her gaze flickered to the window, a brief, almost imperceptible shift. "It was such a shock, Evelyn. Terrible, terrible shock. We just want you back to yourself. To the Evelyn we know." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The one who didn't ask too many questions, the one who didn't see too much. I remembered a time years ago, when I'd stumbled upon some of Dad's shady dealings. I was younger then, maybe 22, fresh out of college and full of naive idealism. I'd found some discrepancies in the company books, asked Dad about them, and he'd brushed me off. Eleanor had taken me aside later. "Evelyn, darling," she'd said, her voice soft but firm, her eyes holding mine with an unnerving intensity. "Some things are best left unexplored. Your father works hard to provide for us. He has a unique way of doing business. It's important for the family's stability that we don't interfere. Do you understand?" I'd understood then, in a way I hadn't fully grasped until now. She hadn't just been asking for my silence. She'd been conditioning me, shaping me into the compliant daughter they needed. She'd been teaching me to look away, to accept the carefully curated reality they presented. "Hayes is doing everything he can," Eleanor went on, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "He's very good. He understands how fragile you are right now. He's making sure you get the rest you need. The right medication to keep you calm." Calm. Yes, that was the word. Not healing, not recovering, but staying calm. Staying still. Staying silent. Her words were a subtle confirmation of my father's earlier conversation, the mention of Hayes and medication. She wasn't just a worried mother. She was an active participant in their plan to keep me incapacitated. She sighed, a theatrical sound that barely touched her eyes. It's all for the best, sweetheart. For the family. We have to protect what we've built. You wouldn't want anything to jeopardize that, would you? The question was rhetorical, a statement disguised as a query. She was reminding me of my place, of my duty. My supposed duty was to be the perfect, silent daughter, an ornament to the Reed name, never a threat. Her visit wasn't about love or concern. It was about reinforcing the narrative, ensuring I remained the docile invalid they'd created. But her words, meant to soothe, only fanned the flames of my cold fury. She thought she was protecting the family. She was just digging their grave deeper, and mine with it. The weight of her lies settled over me, a heavy shroud, but beneath it, a spark of defiance began to glow. The sterile white of the Jude's hospital was a constant, a blank canvas for my trapped mind. Days bled into nights, marked only by the dimming and brightening of the fluorescent lights and the hushed footsteps of nurses. My body lay still, a statue in a hospital bed, but my brain was a frantic hummingbird, buzzing with every sound, every sigh, every whisper that drifted into my room. I was a ghost, an invisible witness to my own life, or what was left of it. My father's chilling confession and my mother's practiced lies were still heavy in the air, a toxic perfume clinging to the sterile sheets. I was starting to understand the depth of their rot, the carefully constructed facade of the Reed family. But the worst was yet to come. It was the sound of heavy, uneven footsteps approaching my room, a frantic rhythm that spoke of pure panic. My older brother. He was usually so full of bluster, always trying to prove himself to Dad, but this was different. This was raw, unadulterated fear. He practically burst into the room, not even bothering to close the door. He was talking on his phone, his voice a desperate, ragged whisper. I could hear the other person on the line, a low, gruff voice that sounded vaguely familiar, like someone from Dad's business associates. No, you don't understand, Thomas stammered, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His breath hitched with each word. It wasn't supposed to go down like that. Swear. It was just supposed to be a message. A warning. A warning. My stomach twisted. I knew Thomas was the muscle, the one Dad sent when things got unpleasant. But this sounded like more than just a stern talking to. He fought back, Thomas choked out, his voice cracking. He didn't just take it. He came at me. I panicked, okay? I reacted. It was self-defense. Self-defense. My mind raced. Who was he talking about? And what had happened to them? I strained to hear the voice on the other end of the line. It was cold, devoid of emotion. The body. What body? I don't know anything about a body. Thomas's voice rose in pitch, a desperate plea. It was an accident. A terrible, terrible accident. Got rid of evidence. Like you said. Burned it. All of it. No one will ever find anything. No one will connect it to me. Or to Dad. Burned it. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just about shady business deals anymore. This was violence. Real brutal violence. Thomas, my impulsive, often reckless brother, had crossed a line. A line I never thought he had in him. What about Evelyn? The gruff voice on the phone asked, cutting through Thomas's panicked ramblings. Thomas froze. His face, visible in the dim light filtering through the blinds, was pale. His eyes wide with terror. She doesn't know anything. She's out of it. The doctors said. She's not going to remember anything. It's perfect. It's a blessing in disguise. A blessing in disguise. He was talking about me, about my accident, as if it were some convenient way to keep me quiet. My supposed coma was their shield, their alibi. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just covering up financial crimes. They were covering up murder. And Thomas, my own brother, was responsible. He ended the call abruptly, his hand trembling as he shoved the phone into his pocket. He looked around the room, his gaze sweeping over me. his eyes lingering for a moment before darting away, as if my still form held some terrifying power. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, muttering to himself, "Just gotta keep it together, Tommy. Just gotta keep it together. No one knows. No one can ever know." He backed out of the room, leaving the door ajar, the echo of his fear a chilling reminder of the darkness that had truly consumed my family. The sterile white of the room suddenly felt suffocating, a tomb where secrets festered and lives were extinguished. The fear in Thomas's voice was a new kind of poison, seeping into the already poisoned air of my supposed recovery. They thought I was a helpless invalid. They were so wrong. The sterile white of Jude's hospital was a constant, a blank canvas for my trapped mind. Days bled into nights, marked only by the dimming and brightening of the fluorescent lights and the hushed footsteps of nurses. My body lay still, a statue in a hospital bed, but my brain was a frantic hummingbird, buzzing with every sound, every sigh, every whisper that drifted into my room. I was a ghost, an invisible witness to my own life, or what was left of it. My father's chilling confession and my mother's practiced lies were still heavy in the air, a toxic perfume clinging to the sterile sheets. I was starting to understand the depth of their rot, the carefully constructed facade of the Reed family. But the worst was yet to come. It was the sound of heavy, uneven footsteps approaching my room, a frantic rhythm that spoke of pure panic. My older brother. He was usually so full of bluster, always trying to prove himself to Dad, but this was different. This was raw, unadulterated fear. He practically burst into the room, not even bothering to close the door. He was talking on his phone, his voice a desperate, ragged whisper. I could hear the other person on the line, a low, gruff voice that sounded vaguely familiar, like someone from Dad's business associates. No, you don't understand," Thomas stammered, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His breath hitched with each word. "It wasn't supposed to go down like that. Swear. It was just supposed to be a message. A warning. A warning." My stomach twisted. I knew Thomas was the muscle, the one Dad sent when things got unpleasant. But this sounded like more than just a stern talking to. "He fought back," Thomas choked out, his voice cracking. "He didn't just take it. He came at me. I panicked, okay? I reacted. It was self-defense. Self-defense." My mind raced. Who was he talking about? And what had happened to them? I strained to hear the voice on the other end of the line. It was cold, devoid of emotion. "The body. What body?" "I don't know anything about a body." Thomas's voice rose in pitch, a desperate plea. "It was an accident. A terrible, terrible accident. Got rid of evidence. Like you said. Burned it. All of it. No one will ever find anything. No one will connect it to me. Or to Dad. Burned it." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just about shady business deals anymore. This was violence. Real brutal violence. Thomas, my impulsive, often reckless brother, had crossed a line. A line I never thought he had in him. "What about Evelyn?" the gruff voice on the phone asked, cutting through Thomas's panicked ramblings. Thomas froze. His face, visible in the dim light filtering through the blinds, was pale. His eyes wide with terror. She doesn't know anything. She's out of it. The doctors said. She's not going to remember anything. It's perfect. It's a blessing in disguise. A blessing in disguise." He was talking about me, about my accident, as if it were some convenient way to keep me quiet. My supposed coma was their shield, their alibi. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just covering up financial crimes. They were covering up murder. And Thomas, my own brother, was responsible. He ended the call abruptly, his hand trembling as he shoved the phone into his pocket. He looked around the room, his gaze sweeping over me, his eyes lingering for a moment before darting away, as if my still form held some terrifying power. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, muttering to himself, Just gotta keep it together, Tommy. Just gotta keep it together. No one knows. No one can ever know. He backed out of the room, leaving the door ajar, the echo of his fear a chilling reminder of the darkness that had truly consumed my family. The sterile white of the room suddenly felt suffocating, a tomb where secrets festered and lives were extinguished. The fear in Thomas's voice was a new kind of poison, seeping into the already poisoned air of my supposed recovery. They thought I was a helpless invalid. They were so wrong. The fluorescent lights of Jude's hummed, a monotonous drone that usually faded into the background. But today, it felt like a spotlight, highlighting the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Hayes entered, his usual crisp white coat seeming a little less pristine. He carried his physician's stethoscope, the cool metal glinting. He wasn't here for a routine check. He always came with Robert, my father, when he wanted to have a serious talk about my condition. Evelyn, Dr. Hayes began, his voice smooth, practiced. He stood by my bedside, his gaze sweeping over me, a professional assessment. But something in his eyes was different. Flicker. A hint of something that wasn't just medical concern. It was a shadow of doubt. Robert stood by the window, his back to us. His silhouette a familiar, imposing figure. He turned, a forced smile on his face. Samuel, good to see you. Any change? Hayes cleared his throat, his fingers fiddling with the stethoscope. No, Robert. Still no significant response. Her vitals are stable, of course. But the brain activity, it's consistent with a deep, unresponsive state. He paused, his gaze drifting back to me, then quickly away. Though I must admit sometimes I wonder. Robert's head snapped up. Wonder what, Samuel? What are you implying? His voice was sharp, laced with a sudden tension. Nothing, Robert, nothing at all. Dr. Hayes said quickly, his tone becoming more formal, more guarded. Just the usual professional curiosity. The human body is a complex thing. We see so many variations. He looked at Robert, his eyes holding the older man's gaze for a beat too long. Are you absolutely certain about the dosage of her medication? We want to ensure she's comfortable, of course, but we don't want to over-sedate her, do we? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Over-sedate. It was a gentle way of hinting at what I already suspected. They were keeping me drugged, keeping me docile. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Hayes, you know how important it is for Evelyn to remain calm. To rest. The doctors said it's crucial for her recovery. Of course, Dr. Hayes murmured, but his gaze was still fixed on Robert, a silent question in his eyes. He adjusted his stethoscope, a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He knew. Or at least he suspected. The professional detachment was cracking, revealing a man who might be wrestling with his conscience. He was the family doctor, sure, but he was also a doctor. And doctors were supposed to heal, not to be complicit in keeping someone trapped. He gave me one last searching look, a look that felt like a promise, or perhaps a warning, before turning to leave with Robert. The door clicked shut, but the doctor's doubt lingered, a tiny crack in the facade of their carefully constructed lie. The sterile white walls of Jude's hospital, once a symbol of my helplessness, now felt like a cage I was slowly but surely picking the lock of. Hayes's visit, and the subtle tremor in his voice when he questioned the medication dosage, had been a jolt. He'd seen something, or suspected something, beyond the carefully crafted narrative Robert and Eleanor had spun. It wasn't just about keeping me comfortable. It was about keeping me. My mind, once a frantic hummingbird, was now a sharp hawk, circling and dissecting every overheard word, every hushed exchange. Thomas's panicked confession about a message, warning gone wrong, kept replaying. He'd said, he fought back. Panic. It was self-defense. Then, the chilling question from the gruff voice on the phone. What about Evelyn? Thomas's response. She doesn't know anything. She's out of it. The doctors said. She's not going to remember anything. It's perfect. A blessing in disguise. A blessing in disguise. My accident. The words echoed in the quiet of my room, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile facade of my family. They hadn't just been covering up Dad's shady deals. They'd been covering up something far uglier. Thomas, my impulsive, often reckless brother, had been involved in something violent. And my car crash. It wasn't just a tragic accident that landed me here. I started to connect the dots, jagged pieces of conversations forming a disturbing picture. The business associates Dad dealt with weren't just crooked, they were dangerous. Thomas, always desperate for Dad's approval, was clearly in deep. He'd been sent to deliver a message, likely to someone who had crossed Robert. But the message had turned violent, and Thomas, in his panic, had done something irreversible. He'd gotten rid of a body, burned it, and then the crucial link, my crash. It happened right after that phone call Thomas had. Was it a coincidence? Or Hayes's question about the medication? His subtle doubt. He was hinting that my state wasn't natural. They were keeping me sedated, keeping me from waking up, from remembering. My coma wasn't a medical condition. It was a prison sentence, designed to silence me. The motive clicked into place with a sickening thud. They needed me out of the way. Maybe I'd seen too much, heard too much, or maybe I was simply in the path of whatever Robert was orchestrating. Thomas's fear wasn't just about what he'd done. It was about what had done to. My accident wasn't an accident at all. It was a deliberate act to keep me quiet, to ensure I couldn't expose them. The realization settled deep in my gut, cold and heavy. This wasn't just about crime. It was about survival. My survival. And the game had just changed. The sterile white of Jude's hospital was starting to feel less like a prison and more like a stage. My mind, sharp and focused, was already working on the next act. Hayes's visit, his subtle questions about my meds, had been a huge sign. He suspected something was off, and that was my opening. My family thought I was a doll, a pretty decoration stuck in a perpetual sleep. They were so wrong. I needed to reach Sarah. My best friend, Sarah Jenkins. She was the only one outside this mess I could trust, the one person who knew the real Evelyn, not the carefully crafted image my parents projected. But how? My hands were useless, my voice a prisoner in my own throat. Direct communication was impossible. I remembered the small, antique silver locket my grandmother had given me. It was usually around my neck, but after the crash, it had been removed and placed in my personal effects box, which sat on the bedside table. It was a long shot, a ridiculous idea, but I had to try. My fingers, still stiff and uncooperative, twitched. I focused all my energy, all my will, on that locket. I pictured it, its cool weight, the tiny clasp. I willed my fingers to move, to brush against the table, to nudge the box. Took what felt like hours. The fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous tune. The nurse's footsteps echoed down the hall, but I was locked in a silent battle with my own body. Finally, a minuscule tremor. My pinky finger grazed the edge of the box. Tiny shift. It was barely perceptible, but it was a start. I kept at it, inch by agonizing inch, pushing the box closer to the edge of the table. The nurses, thankfully, were busy with other patients. They wouldn't notice a slight movement of a bedside table. My goal was the floor. If I could get the box to fall, maybe something inside would spill out. Something Sarah would recognize. My gaze flickered to the small pile of my belongings. Among them, nestled in a plastic bag, was the locket. I had to make it fall. With a final, desperate surge of effort, I managed to tip the box. It slid, then tumbled, hitting the linoleum floor with a soft thud. My personal effects scattered. A tube of lipstick, a small brush, and there, glinting under the harsh hospital lights, was the antique sterling silver locket. It lay there, a silent witness, a beacon of hope. Sarah visited every other day. She'd sit by my side, talking about her life, her job, anything to fill the silence. She'd always tidy up my things, putting them back in their place. This time when she came, she'd see it. She'd see the locket on the floor. Sarah knew how much that locket meant to me. She knew I'd never take it off. Her sharp eyes would catch it, and her mind, as inquisitive as mine, would start to question. Why was it out of the box? Why was it on the floor? It was a tiny seed, planted in the fertile ground of her concern. A whisper of doubt. A hint that something was terribly wrong here, and that her best friend, Evelyn, needed her help. The game was far from over, but now I had an ally. Sarah found the locket on the floor. Her brow furrowed. She knew how I was about that thing, how I never took it off. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the worn silver. "Evelyn," she whispered, her voice laced with that familiar worry. "What happened here?" She placed it back in the box, but her eyes lingered on it, then on me. That was the spark. Over the next few visits, Sarah became my silent accomplice. She'd arrive, her smile a little strained, and start tidying up. While she pretended to arrange my pillows or fold the thin hospital blanket, her eyes would be scanning, her mind working. She'd accidentally knock over my water cup, then use the commotion to slip a small notepad and pen from her bag onto my bedside table, disguised as a dropped item. I couldn't write, not really, but I could nudge. I could use my fingers, stiff and clumsy as they were, to make marks. Sarah understood. She'd collect the notepad later, her face a mask of concern, and decipher my shaky scribbles. Our first real breakthrough came with the physician's stethoscope. Hayes was in my room, doing his usual rounds. He'd left it hanging on the 4-pole. Sarah, during one of her tidying sessions, managed to snag it. She claimed she'd bumped it, that it fell into her tote bag. Later at her apartment she examined it. Tucked inside the rubber tubing, carefully folded, was a tiny slip of paper. It was a prescription, not for me but for Robert. A high-dose sedative, far more than he'd ever need for a headache. It was dated the day before my accident. A chill went down my spine. They weren't just keeping me quiet. They were preparing for something or someone. Sarah also started paying closer attention to the hushed conversations that happened outside my room. She'd linger in the hallway, pretending to check her phone, her ears tuned to the hushed tones of Eleanor and Robert. She'd relay snippets to me later, piecing together a disturbing puzzle. Robert was talking about damage control and loose ends. Eleanor was panicking about prying eyes and keeping the narrative tight. Sarah started taking discreet photos with her phone whenever she could, capturing Robert's tense meetings with shady-looking guys in the hospital lobby, or Eleanor's hushed, urgent calls from the family's law offices. She even managed to snag a discarded coffee cup from Robert's hand after one of these meetings. Forensics could tell them a lot about what he'd been drinking, or if anything else was on it. The most crucial piece came when Sarah managed to get her hands on the leather-bound ledger. It was a long shot. Eleanor had brought it to the hospital, supposedly to review some personal accounts. Sarah, with a well-timed distraction involving a spilled tray of food in the corridor, managed to slip it into her bag while Eleanor was occupied. Back at her place, she spent hours poring over it. It wasn't just financial records. There were coded entries, names I didn't recognize, and chillingly, references to disposal and unfortunate accidents. It was all there, the dirty laundry of the Reed Empire laid bare. Sarah photographed every page. We were building a case, brick by painstaking brick, all from my silent, watchful perch. The sterile walls of St. Jude's were no longer just a prison, they were my vantage point. The hum of the machines had become a lullaby, a soundtrack to my forced stillness. For months, I'd been a ghost in my own life, a silent observer in the sterile halls of St. Jude's Hospital. But the whispers, the stolen glances, the carefully curated evidence Sarah had been smuggling in, it had all been building to this. The plan, hatched in the quiet desperation of my room, was set. It was time to wake up. The first sign was a flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in my right hand. It felt like a jolt of electricity, a signal that the circuits were finally firing again. I focused, channeling every ounce of my will into that single digit. Another twitch. Then a slow, deliberate movement. My fingers curled, then uncurled. It was agonizingly slow, like trying to move through thick mud, but it was movement. Real movement. Sarah had been here just this morning. She'd brought the usual, a forced smile, a quick tidy of my things, and a whispered update. She'd left the small notepad and pen, tucked beneath a stack of magazines, just as we'd planned. Now, with a surge of adrenaline, I reached for them. My hand shook violently, the pen clattering against the plastic. I gripped it tighter, my knuckles white. The first word was a shaky, jagged scrawl. Now, I needed to make it look natural, a sudden return to consciousness. I took a deep breath, trying to control the frantic beating of my heart. I focused on the sounds around me, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor, the distant chatter of nurses, the muffled footsteps in the hallway. I waited for the opportune moment, the brief lull in activity that always seemed to follow the shift change. Then I opened my eyes. The fluorescent lights were blinding, harsh against my newly awakened vision. I blinked, letting my eyes adjust, taking in the familiar sterile room. A nurse, a kind-faced woman named Brenda, was checking my vitals. She jumped, startled, dropping her clipboard with a clatter. "Evelyn! Oh my God, Evelyn!" she gasped, her eyes wide with shock. She fumbled for the call button, her hands trembling. The commotion brought them running. Eleanor was the first to appear, her face a mask of feigned relief, quickly followed by Robert. His expression a carefully calculated mix of concern and something else. Something I now recognized as pure, unadulterated fear. Thomas trailed behind them, looking pale and jumpy. "Evelyn, darling! You're awake!" Eleanor cried, rushing to my bedside, her voice thick with emotion. She reached for my hand, but I flinched, pulling away. Robert stepped forward, his voice smooth as ever. "Evelyn, it's so good to see you conscious. We were so worried." He squeezed Eleanor's shoulder, a performative gesture of comfort. I looked at them, really looked at them for the first time in months. The fog had lifted. The feigned sleep was over. I saw not loving family, but a pack of predators, their eyes glinting with guilt and desperation. My mind, sharp and clear, replayed every whispered confession, every hushed threat, every calculated lie. I had heard it all. And now they were about to hear from me. I managed a weak smile, my voice raspy from disuse. I had the most terrible dream. The game had just changed. The sterile white walls of St. Jude's felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been a few weeks since I'd woken up. Weeks of forced smiles, of playing the part of the recovering amnesiac, all while Sarah and I meticulously planned this. Tonight was the night. The Reed family estate, a place that always reeked of old money and hidden rot, was buzzing with a fake sense of warmth. Eleanor had insisted on a welcome home dinner, a grand affair for the neighbors and a select few business associates. Perfect. The more eyes, the better. I walked into the grand ballroom, leaning a little too heavily on my cane, a deliberate act to play up my lingering weakness. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the polite chatter and clinking glasses. Robert stood by the fireplace, looking every bit the distinguished patriarch, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Eleanor, draped in emerald silk, flitted around, playing the gracious hostess, her eyes darting nervously in my direction. Thomas, looking as shifty as ever, nursed a drink in a corner, his gaze flicking towards the entrance whenever the doors opened. Sarah was there, of course, blending in with the crowd, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second. Silent nod. She knew her role. She'd brought the encrypted USB drive, a tiny thing disguised as a keychain, tucked safely in her clutch. I made my way through the room, accepting polite congratulations, my smile tight. Each handshake, each forced compliment, felt like another step closer to the truth. I stopped by Robert, my voice deliberately soft, a touch unsteady. "Father," I began, letting my gaze drift towards the large ornate grandfather clock in the hall. That clock. It reminds me of the one at the old mill diner. Remember that night, Thomas? When you confessed about the deal that went bad? Thomas froze, his drink halfway to his lips. His eyes widened, a flicker of pure panic crossing his face. Robert's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around his glass. Eleanor, ever the actress, rushed over, her hand flying to her chest. "Evelyn, darling, you mustn't tax yourself. Such a vivid memory, though. Such a shame about that business venture." Her words were smooth, but her eyes were sharp, trying to gauge my reaction, my knowledge. I turned to her, my voice still gentle, but with an edge that I hoped cut through her carefully constructed facade. "And Mother," I continued, my gaze locking with hers. "You were so worried about keeping the narrative tight, weren't you? Especially after everything. You said we needed to control the damage, that no one could ever find out about the disposals." Eleanor's face went ashen. She sputtered. "Evelyn, what are you talking about? You're confused." "The doctor said The doctors," I interrupted, my voice gaining a little strength, "were remarkably well compensated to keep me quiet. Just like some people were well compensated to ensure certain accidents happened." My eyes flicked to Robert, then to Thomas. Robert stepped forward. His charm suddenly gone, replaced by a cold, hard glint. "Evelyn, this is not the time or place for these delusions. You're still recovering." "Am I?" I countered, my voice now clear and steady. I reached into the small clutch Sarah had given me, pulling out a single red rose. It was a symbol, a reminder of something I'd once cherished. I held it up, my fingers brushing against its velvety petals. "This reminds me of the truth that's been hidden away, like a secret in a locked box." I looked directly at Robert. "Like the truth about the Reed family ledger. All those coded entries, Father. The unfortunate accidents. The money that changed hands to keep them quiet." The room had gone silent. Every eye was on us. Robert's face was a mask of fury. Eleanor looked like she might faint, and Thomas was practically vibrating with fear. This was it. The first crack in their carefully constructed world. The game was far from over, but the first move had been made. The silence in the ballroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My family, usually so quick with their practiced smiles and smooth lies, were frozen. Robert's face was a thundercloud. Eleanor looked like she was about to keel over, and Thomas looked like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe he had. The ghost of the person they thought they'd gotten rid of. I held the rose, its crimson petals a stark contrast to the pale, shocked faces around me. It was a symbol, a reminder of everything they'd tried to bury. The truth. The ledger. The accidents. My voice, no longer raspy but sharp as broken glass, cut through the heavy air. "You thought I wouldn't hear, did you? Lying there helpless. You thought you could say whatever you wanted." Eleanor finally found her voice, a weak, reedy sound. "Evelyn, darling, you're overwrought. This is too much for you. We should get you back to bed." She took a step towards me, her hand outstretched, but I recoiled. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice dangerously low. I heard everything. Every whispered confession, every calculated lie. I heard Robert bragging about how he handled the problem at the Blackwood Forest Preserve. I heard you, Eleanor, talking about how you made sure Dr. Hayes kept his mouth shut. And Thomas, I heard you crying about what you did to that poor man at the Old Mill Diner. How you got paid to make him disappear. Robert lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "This is madness, Evelyn. You're delusional. You've been through trauma." "Trauma?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You want to talk about trauma? Try waking up to find out your own family tried to kill you. Try listening for months as the people you loved most plotted your demise. All for money. All for greed." I glanced at Sarah, who was watching from the edge of the crowd, her expression a mixture of horror and grim determination. She'd done her part. The anonymous tip, the carefully placed breadcrumbs leading to this very moment. Just then, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. Standing there, silhouetted against the light from the foyer, was a man I didn't recognize. He was solid, dressed in a dark suit, with a no-nonsense look on his face. Detective Miller. He scanned the room, his eyes missing nothing, the tension, the fear, the accusatory silence. He'd clearly been expecting something, but maybe not this. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the manufactured calm of the Reed family estate. Detective Miller. I received an anonymous tip regarding some irregularities here tonight. It seems I've arrived at a rather opportune moment. He looked directly at me, his gaze sharp, assessing. He saw the rose, the tremor in my hand, the raw emotion etched on my face. He saw the fear in my family's eyes. Robert tried to regain control, stepping in front of me. Detective, this is a private family matter. My daughter is unwell. She's experiencing delusions. Miller's eyes narrowed. He wasn't buying it. Delusions, Mr. Reed. Or confessions. He turned his attention back to me. Miss Reed, he said, his tone respectful but direct. I understand you've been through a great deal. If you have something you wish to share, now would be the time. I'm here to listen. The air crackled. The carefully constructed facade of the Reed family was crumbling, and the detective's arrival was the final nail in the coffin. This was it. The beginning of the end for them. The game was over. Justice was finally at the door. I took a deep breath, the scent of roses and old money filling my lungs. I was ready. Detective Miller's gaze swept over us, a silent, heavy assessment. He'd walked into a pressure cooker, and I could practically feel the steam rising off my family. Robert, ever the showman, tried to regain his footing. Detective, I assure you this is a misunderstanding. My daughter has been through a terrible ordeal. Is not herself. I held his gaze, a cold, steady look that promised no quarter. Not myself, father. Or finally myself. The self you tried to erase. I turned to Miller, my voice steady, projecting across the suddenly silent ballroom. Detective, I've been listening. For months. From a hospital bed, pretending to be out of it. Listening to my own family plot and confess their crimes. Eleanor let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her pearls. Thomas looked like he was about to bolt. Robert's face was a mask of pure fury, but even he knew the game was up. I heard you, Robert, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Talking about the Blackwood Forest Preserve. How you made sure that problem was handled. And you, mother, how you paid off Dr. Hayes to keep quiet, to sign off on my accident report. I looked at Thomas, his face pale and slick with sweat. And you, Thomas, crying on the phone after you took care of that man at the Old Mill Diner. The unfortunate business deal that needed a permanent solution. Miller's eyes flicked between us, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here for pleasantries. He was here for facts. Miss Reed, he said, his voice calm, cutting through the tension. You mentioned evidence. What kind of evidence? This was it. The moment Sarah and I had worked so hard for. I reached into the small clutch Sarah had given me, my fingers closing around the cool metal of the encrypted USB drive. I held it up. This, I said, my voice ringing with conviction. This contains everything. Financial records, coded messages, recorded conversations. Proof of every shady deal, every bribe, every disposal. My father's Reed family ledger is all in here, decoded. Robert took a step forward, his voice a low growl. That's a lie, Evelyn. You're making this up. Am I? I challenged, my gaze unwavering. Then explain the offshore accounts, Robert. Explain the payments to that fixer you used. Explain why you were so eager to have me declared incapacitated, so you could control my inheritance. I looked at Eleanor. And you, mother. You knew. You were complicit. You helped orchestrate this entire charade, all to keep the family name clean and your comfortable life intact. Eleanor began to sob, a theatrical display that fooled no one. Evelyn, you don't understand the pressure. The sacrifices. Sacrifices. Scoff. You sacrificed my life, mother. You sacrificed my trust. You all did. I turned to Thomas. And you, Thomas, you were so easily manipulated. Your father used your fear, your weakness, to make you do his dirty work. But you still heard yourself confess, didn't you? You still know what you did. Miller stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the USB drive. Miss Reed, if this information is genuine, it could be very significant. He looked at Robert, Eleanor, and Thomas, his gaze sharp and accusing. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Reed, Thomas, you are all currently persons of interest. I advise you not to obstruct this investigation. Robert sputtered. This is outrageous. We'll have our lawyers here immediately. You can call every lawyer in Connecticut, I said, my voice cold. It won't change what's on this drive. It won't change what you did. You thought I was just a helpless victim, lying in a hospital bed. You thought you'd gotten away with it. But I heard everything. And now everyone else will too. I looked at Detective Miller, a grim satisfaction settling in. The truth is out. And it's not going away. The weight of months of silence, of forced smiles and hidden tears, finally lifted, replaced by the chilling clarity of justice about to be served. The air in the ballroom, thick with deceit moments before, now crackled with the undeniable force of truth. The air in the ballroom was thick, not with the usual cloying perfume and desperation of the Reed family's social events, but with a raw, undeniable tension. Detective Miller stood there, a solid, unmoving presence, his eyes sweeping across each of us. He'd walked into the middle of a storm, and the quiet that followed my last words was louder than any shouting. Robert's face was a mask of disbelief, quickly hardening into a familiar rage. He tried to puff himself up, to reclaim the dominance he'd held for so long. This is preposterous, Detective. My daughter is clearly unwell. She's been through a terrible ordeal, and her mind is confused. I met his gaze, a cold fire burning in my chest. Confused, Father. Or finally clear. For months I heard you. I heard you talking about the Blackwood Forest Preserve, about making sure that problem was handled. Your problem. Your solution. My voice didn't waver. It was steady, strong, carrying the weight of every silent, agonizing moment. Miller's attention shifted to Eleanor. She was clutching her pearls, her face pale, but there was a flicker of something calculating in her eyes. She was already thinking about damage control, about how to spin this. And you, Mother, I continued, my voice dropping slightly, laced with a bitterness that surprised even me. You didn't just know. You orchestrated it. You paid Dr. You made sure the reports looked right, that my accident was just that, an accident. All to protect your precious reputation, your comfortable life. Eleanor let out a choked sob, a performance I'd seen 1,000 times before. Evelyn, darling, you're overwrought. This is too much for you. We were only trying to protect you, to keep you safe from the stress. Protect me. I scoffed, the sound sharp and brittle. You protected yourselves. You sacrificed me. You sacrificed everything I believed in. My gaze moved to Thomas, who was practically vibrating with fear. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between his father, Detective Miller, and me. And you, Thomas, you were always the weakest link. Father used you, preyed on your fear. But you heard yourself, didn't you? You heard yourself confessing about the old mill diner, about making that man disappear. You still remember the sound of your own voice, don't you? Thomas flinched as if struck. He mumbled something inaudible, his head bowed. He knew. He knew he was caught. Detective Miller stepped forward, his gaze intense, focused. He held out his hand. Miss Reed, the USB drive, please. I didn't hesitate. I reached into the small clutch Sarah had given me, my fingers closing around the cool metal of the encrypted USB drive. It felt heavy in my hand, not with its physical weight, but with the immense burden of the truth it held. I placed it in Miller's palm. He examined it for a moment, then looked back at my family, his expression grim. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Read Thomas, Miller said. His voice calm but carrying an authority that silenced even Robert's blustering protests. Based on the information Miss Reed has provided, and what appears to be substantial evidence on this drive, you are all considered persons of interest in multiple criminal investigations. I'm going to have to ask you to accompany me to the station. Robert lunged forward, his face contorted. This is an outrage. You can't do this. We have rights. We'll call our lawyers. You can call every lawyer in the state, Robert, I said, my voice cold and clear. It won't change what's on this drive. It won't change what you did. As uniformed officers who had quietly entered the ballroom moved to escort my family out, Eleanor let out a piercing shriek. Thomas stumbled, his legs seemingly giving out. Robert, however, stood tall, his eyes burning with a hatred that was almost palpable. He glared at me, a silent promise of retribution. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The ballroom, once a symbol of their power and influence, was now a stage for their downfall. The whispers I'd endured for months, the hushed confessions and calculated lies, were now laid bare for everyone to see. The carefully constructed facade of the Reed family had shattered, leaving behind only the ugly, undeniable truth. As the heavy oak doors closed behind my family and the officers, a profound silence descended. It wasn't the suffocating silence of deception, but the quiet hum of justice finally being served. The weight I'd carried for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of weary relief. The game was over. They had played their hand and they had lost. The silence in the ballroom was deafening after they were gone. No more hushed whispers, no more forced smiles, just the echo of slammed doors and the faint scent of expensive perfume clashing with the cold, hard reality of law enforcement. For months, this grand estate had been a gilded cage, a place where my own family had plotted my downfall. Now it felt like a tomb, but one I was finally free to leave. Detective Miller had been efficient, almost too efficient. He'd taken the USB drive, his expression unreadable, and then simply nodded, the signal for the uniformed officers to do their job. Robert's rage, Eleanor's dramatic sobs, Thomas's pathetic whimpers. It had all played out exactly as I'd planned, yet watching it happen was still a gut punch. They were my family, or at least they were supposed to be. I stood there for a long moment, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving behind a hollow ache. Sarah had been waiting for me outside, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pride. She'd been my lifeline, my connection to the outside world while I was playing dead. We'd barely spoken, just a quick hug, a shared understanding that everything had changed. Now, standing alone in the vast, silent ballroom, I felt the weight of it all. The months of pretending, the constant vigilance, the gnawing fear, it had all taken a toll. I was free, yes, but I wasn't the same Evelyn who had driven off the road that fateful day. That Evelyn was gone, buried somewhere in the sterile white walls of St. Jude's Hospital. This Evelyn was forged in the darkness, tempered by betrayal and armed with the truth. I walked out of the ballroom, not towards the grand entrance, but towards the servants' quarters, a part of the estate I'd rarely bothered with before. Felt more real somehow. The polished marble and antique furniture of the main house seemed to mock me now, a monument to their lies. Sarah met me by the kitchens, her face etched with concern. "Evelyn, are you okay?" I managed a weak smile. "As okay as I can be, I guess." "They're really gone. For now." Miller seemed pretty sure of himself. I looked down at my hands, noticing for the first time the faint tremor. "It's weird. Thought I'd feel triumphant, but mostly I just feel me." Sarah put an arm around me. "That's normal. You've been through hell. Give yourself time." We walked out into the crisp autumn air, leaving the Reed family estate behind us. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. It was beautiful in a way, but it felt like a place I no longer belonged. "So, what now?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs. Now I figure out who Evelyn Reed is supposed to be. The real Evelyn. not the one they tried to break. I looked at the sky, a vast expanse of orange and purple. It was a new beginning, scary and uncertain, but it was mine. I had reclaimed my life piece by painful piece. The scars would remain, a constant reminder of what I'd endured, but they wouldn't define me. They would be a testament to my strength. I thought about the antique sterling silver locket I'd kept hidden, a small token from my grandmother. It represented a past that was still pure, a time before the rot set in. I would hold on to that, and I would build something new from the ashes. It wouldn't be easy. There would be paperwork, legal battles, and the lingering shadow of my family's disgrace. But I wouldn't be hiding anymore. I was ready to step into the light, forever changed, but finally truly free. The road ahead was unwritten, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I was Evelyn, and I was ready to live. That's it. If you liked this video, share it with your friends and leave your like. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss more videos like this. Leave your comments saying what you thought of the video and what you would like to see in the next videos. Remembering that we have other videos in this style that you will like to watch, just enter our channel that I guarantee you will like. Until the next video.